It was actually a surprise for us to really uh, understand the drawing as a cognitive act, because uh, I've been doing workshop with children for many years. From 1989 onwards, I have been working with children on and off. uh, and it's only in 2013 or 14, and after so many years of working with children, that one suddenly realized the importance of cognitive importance of drawing. And it was an accidental discovery. uh, and we were actually running a school in Pune, and we called it reimagining schools. And so we had naturally set up a environment in which children were completely free, and they were doing all kinds of things. And our job as so-called teachers were just to study what the children are doing, that's all. So we would hang around here and there without disturbing them, document what they were doing. So we started this school in 2011. And so even that 3 years, the we were actually focusing more on what children were actually doing, what we call as play and all that. And it was only towards the end, 2014 mid, when we were planning to do a samvad on drawing, and we set up all the thousands of drawing that children had done. As we began to look at these drawings, we saw a certain kind of a pattern, a certain kind of a, it was revealing for us that, and of course, we had not done any kind of interference, because the whole rule of the school was that don't interfere with children. They know, because they are biologically equipped by life to make sense of the world. And any kind of intervention is going to interfere with that process. So we were very clear that there shouldn't be any intervention, any kind of help, any kind of praise. So children were also drawing, and they were doing all kinds of drawings. So our study on drawing was just maybe 5 to 10% compared to our focus on what children were actually making and doing. So but drawing became a very important thing, almost and in 2014 we had to leave the school. So that was a completely an incomplete kind of a research. But it kept on coming back. Wherever we went into different schools, we kept on understanding that there is a fundamental possibility in drawing that we have really not looked at all. So the presentation right now I'm doing is, regarding that, why we have not been able to understand this, and what would be the kind of course that we are proposing. And you see, the problem is that right now the educated people belong to one kind of paradigm, whereas children belong to another kind of paradigm. It is very difficult for educated people to understand this, because right from childhood they have been conditioned to believe in a certain system. So they are in one paradigm in which children need to be taught. And so it will be very, very important for the participants who have come here to be very kind, very open, and to what we want to share, because this is not something that most people would have even thought about. So it will require a whole lot of, you will have to stop your present understanding of various things. Otherwise, whatever we are going to talk about will not enter you at all. So my request is that, please, stop your mind from kind of creating agreements, disagreements. Let's hold that for some time and just look at what we have to say, and then let's see, then we can take it from there. So the course that we are proposing, because see, why the course is also because we have found that the presentation that we do has not been very helpful in really helping people to understand. This one presentation, once in a while presentation doesn't really help. So the presentation, we felt that it has to be much longer kind of thing, duration, in which there is a long-term engagement with this whole aspect in a completely new paradigm. That is the reason why we have kept it for 3 months, and a constant, uh, you know, uh, uh, constant challenge that we need to. Actually, this will also help us to totally. We keep talking about what is deschooling, but I'm not sure whether people have actually done any deschooling. These are all remaining just in the realm of words. But deschooling and unlearning is something that can only happen provided we shift the paradigm in which we are right now trapped in. So it's almost like a matrix. We are trapped in a certain kind of thought system, mind system, and unless we are able to come out of that, we will never be able to understand children in the true sense. Because children, as I told you, children belong to a completely new, another kind of paradigm altogether, which is actually designed to create knowledge, not to analyze somebody's information. And to create knowledge of the real world, not the written word. So this has to be very, very clearly understood, that learning is actually creation of knowledge and not analyzing somebody's information, not memorizing somebody's information. So this is the ground that we need to be aware of before we enter into this exploration. So the cognitive importance of drawing means that children draw spontaneously without guidance. Only then it is going to be, there is cognitive importance. Otherwise, there is no cognitive importance. So the course will address how to understand what children draw, how to connect the other developmental stages, meaning the talking, walking, the achievement of dexterity, and you will find that same kind of biological process also in drawing. And then how do we enable situation for children to draw? Now, this is because drawing is not a natural response of children. Drawing is a new response which has been forced onto our culture because of the written interface that we are engaging with. That is, the two-dimensional interface is what is now forcing us to draw, because drawing is not a natural act. And also, why it is important not to judge, not to encourage children to draw. And also, why it is important not to teach drawing. And the other thing that we address is that why drawing books are detrimental to children's cognitive development, why drawing should not be understood as art. This is another major problem, that that it is very difficult to shift our paradigm from art into cognition, because art has been established so firmly into the modern mind that several changes will have to be made in order to shift from art. Because the moment we talk about art, we talk about self-expression, we talk about all kinds of things that have been made up by modernity, and it doesn't exist at all actually. This is all made up by modern constructs actually. And another thing is that how drawing is more important than learning to write. That how the child can be guided in its own process, not guiding by somebody, but the very act of drawing will guide the child to understand the connection between the three-dimensional world, two-dimensional space, and the role of writing in representing what exists in three-dimensional world. And why drawing should precede writing, that's another point. And why drawing should not be used as a precursor to learn to write. But this is another thing that has been practiced in many places, that children are made to draw various kinds of things, circles, half circle, and all that, lines, so that children can learn to write well. This is again something that should not be done. Why children should not be restricted to draw anyway. This is another thing that we will look at. And notion of rules and freedom in children, because this idea of rule law, freedom. This is all again constructed within our minds actually. Children doesn't understand any of these things. They are free. So they will do everything freely without any constraints, you know. The notion of constraint is our construct. Children don't have any constraint. And one very important thing is that don't keep asking too many questions to children about their drawing. You know, once in a while it's okay, but you know, because this again comes from our idea of judging what the children are doing. We have to stop judging children altogether, and a reversal of role is what is important, that we are cognitively damaged, so, and children are perfectly fine. So we need to reverse the situation as to how do we learn from children about learning the real world, how to see the real world, and how to decode it. So highlights of the course, how we are going to conduct the course is that, and it will give an opportunity to deep inquiry into life, learning, children, and ourselves. And a non-expert and dependent, non-teaching, learner-centered approach, experiential with the online format. Even within this, one can, you know, devise, you know, experiential kind of, you know, activity. And it is also about how do we learn to see through the eyes of children, and almost like reliving our childhood. You know, this Doman has actually, you know, he has actually devised certain ways in which that people are made to go through certain physical activities that has been missed out in the, like for example, crawling and walking on all fours, you know. This is something, and all these are important in the formation of our brain. And he has been devising activities that has to do with redoing all these activities that we would have missed out in the childhood. Flexible, relaxed space, and because we are having a very small group, we are hoping to have a rich learning exchange. So this is all the kind of course highlight. It's open to teachers, and especially we are wanting to invite people who are afraid of writing, because there are people who are, you know, there is very interesting thing that I keep talking about. That one thing is that there is something called learning disability, and there is another thing, it's also called art disability. You know, of course, learning disability, as actually speaking, it is not the children who are learning disabled. It is the educated who are actually learning disabled, because they don't know how to learn. They know how to analyze somebody's information. They don't know how to create knowledge. Similarly, in that process, they have also lost out on developing of true sense of beauty. This is not art. Art is a completely different, you know, construct in the modern mind. So it is actually very important that one revisit these things, and we are inviting, you know, anybody within the modern framework who want to re-understand what is the real process of being in the world. So I will just quickly take you through this. What prevents understanding? Why do we not understand some of these things? Because we belong to the paradigm, teaching paradigm, and children belong to learning paradigm. So what constitutes knowledge itself is first thing that we need to, you know, look at. Knowledge as written word versus knowledge as experience. Knowledge as ready-made versus knowledge as process. Knowledge to be consumed versus knowledge to be created. I hope this is quite clear. This is precisely the point from which we need to move. And other thing is that children need to be taught versus children as creators of knowledge. So due to this kind of paradigm, we have never observed children, because we think that we know what to do with children, what they need, what to teach, how to teach. All these things are, modern people assume that we know all these things. So we have never really observed whatever children do naturally and normally. So again, within the teaching paradigm, so this is another very, very major issue that most people would be probably angry when I say this, that opinion is now thought of as our knowledge. Because you know, what is opinion? Opinion is, if you actually experience things, you have something to say. But where does your presently knowledge come from? Reading somebody else's books. more theories, more, teachings. This is what our knowledge comes from. So, and most people don't even, and then added to that, there is one strange term that modern people keep on using, called critical thinking. How can you be critical at all? Where is its basis to be critical? Because somebody else has written in another book. So critical thinking is another, this new word that has been going rounds, which is absolutely meaningless in the context of modern paradigm. And then other issue is that ready-made knowledge also means we are dealing with a product, which art is also a product, which also means that we are focusing on the skill. In terms of drawing, our focus is on how to teach children draw very well. We completely forget a process that is involved, and which also means that we create artists and non-artists. So it's like, suppose in childhood you would have done the same thing with writing, what would have happened? The people who do not know how to write well would be termed as people, they would have stopped writing. If the same kind of attitude we would have taken, only the people who can write very well become writers, and the rest will drop out. This is what has happened with drawing. That we kept on, encouraging only people who drew very well according to the teacher. Other people dropped out because they were not considered good, or they were not considered artists. So this categorization is another danger that has been happening. And why is learning to write so important? This is another very important thing to look at. What is a written word? Can this precede knowledge creation? And who creates knowledge? And so what is the role of language actually? Is it for communication or is it for cognition? Important thing to look at, because today it is language that has become the cognitive source. Then creation of category. This is another important thing that prevents us from understanding drawing, because we have created these categories called learning, playing, working, experiencing, and art. Because you have something called experiential learning, another category now, introduced into the modern frame. Just because of this, we then see everything through these kind of categories. So a child is sitting and reading something, is learning. The child is going out and doing something, that is playing. So this category prevents us from looking at drawing as an activity without any of these categories. This is what is very important to understand. Don't create any category in order to look at drawing. Drawing is an act like any other act that your child is doing. And of course, this is another major thing that has been happening, art as self-expression. And if you look at actually tradition, drawing is used in rituals, decorations, social and religious function. It is never ever an activity of self-expression. There was never something called self-expression in tradition. There was self-expression because they were more spiritual and more community oriented and never individualistic. And so one thing that we need to keep in mind is that the only activity the child is engaged in is to make sense of the world. There is no other activity the child is doing if you don't interfere. Including an activity, simple activity like child sitting on a sofa and bouncing. And I'm sure everybody must have observed this. When a child sits on a sofa, the softness of it immediately makes the child to bounce. So why is the child doing that? Why have we not taken, given importance to these activities? So every activity that way, what the child does spontaneously has very important meaning in making sense of the world, to understand materiality, to understand the processes and things like that. So now, when we explore the potential of drawing, this is all the cognitive potential. These are all the various activities that come to work: observation, abstraction, detailing, refinement, repetition, reflection, imagination. All these things are actually part of the cognitive process. And the moment you compare this with writing, you will find that none of this has any place in actually in the act of writing, actually learning to write. So this is very interesting. I came across this, so this was Howard. He told that when my daughter was about 7 years old, she asked me one day that what did I did at work. I told her I worked at the college, that my job was to teach people how to draw. She stared at me and she couldn't believe what this man was telling, and she was asking, "You mean they forgot?" So, because for children, teaching is an absolutely, they don't understand what is there to teach. So this I had mentioned that in the school, we had an opportunity, and that I just mentioned earlier. So one important thing that we need to understand is that we are shaped by what we engage with, and we are biologically equipped to make sense of the world. And in that process, awakening happens, unfolding, developing inherent tools. So the making sense of the world simultaneously develops our cognitive system also, because when you touch something, it touches you back. All senses are two-way processes. You are seeing something, means there is an inner world that is getting open, which is becoming sensitive, which is becoming more observant. So the two systems, one is the word-based system and the world-based system. So we have been brought up in the word-based system, whereas children belong to the world-based system. And the word demands skills like reasoning, memorizing, and all that, and the world demands completely another kind of tools and abilities and cognitive system altogether. So this needs to be kept in mind when we are exploring this. So the basis for all activity that children do to learn is to always revisit their experience. Whatever children have experienced, they recreate that experience, what we call as play. Because this play is again a modern construct. Children don't have that term at all. They are actually recreating their experiences and remaking the events in which there may be an object that can become the toy. Toy is not, like for example, when children use the hand as mobile phone, that's a toy at that point. When a child is sitting on a sofa and bouncing, that's a toy at that point. So toy is never a permanent product. There is no playing with toys. Objects are being used either to understand it or to represent it in some imaginary way. So that is the idea of toy. And in drawing, what happens is that there is a recreation in two-dimensional space. This is what drawing is, because you will see a correlation between experience, play, and drawing. So what I've just mentioned. But again, I just want to remind you that drawing is not a natural response, because children are naturally equipped to make sense of the real world, because that is what children are encountering. Only because we have two-dimensional space within the modern context of books and screens and things like that, then children are kind of motivated to draw. They see drawing, so that is the only reason why children draw. Indeed. So if you look at the traditional system, the Chitrakar caste is what did drawing for community. And Madhubani was practiced by women for particular occasions. Varli is not a painting, but making with rice flour for particular rituals and occasions. Now, because today modernity has completely misunderstood all this, and they are propagating this as some art and things like that. No, this is not art at all. Today, of course, we have reconstructed it, and we are teaching everybody Varli and things like that. Madhubani is going around everywhere. This is quite a meaningless destruction of culture. That is what is happening, because we have nothing, so we are borrowing from somebody and just doing it. Again, a mindless way of homogenizing, and so that's what it is. So another point, just a short point I want to say, is that even storytelling was not for children alone, but for the whole community. This is another point that we need to, another time discuss. What exactly is story? Was there any story only for children, or it was something else altogether? Because today modern people are now busy making stories for children. I think this needs to be relooked at, because what are the kind of stories that you're making? You know, compare that with the story that Tagore wrote, which is meant for everybody. Take any story, take Postman, or that Kabuliwala. Was it for children or is it for everybody? So there is a mediocrization, infantilization that is happening when modern people are engaging with children. We are treating them as people who do not know anything. They are idiots. This is very important that we shift from that paradigm and treat them as equals. So, and also this is very interesting that see, these lines in modernity has taken on a completely different thing altogether. Because if you actually in tradition, the straight lines and very sharp lines are very, very rare actually. Unlike in modernity, you look around everywhere, it is sharp lines and straight lines, almost everywhere. Imagine a mud house in any rural tribal area. You will hardly ever find one straight line, or a sharp edge. That's just not there in the traditional environment. So the appearance of lines in modernity is very interesting. Of course, it is also has to do with the, the printed word and the book and things like that, because all these formats do have a very, very line-like quality. And even in nature, it is very rare actually. And other thing that I would like to talk about is that these are very wrong practices that are being done by adults today. Adults giving topics to draw, looking at drawing a skill, copying from books, drawing cartoons, or giving tricks for children to draw. So there are many issues like this which are detrimental for children. Even giving color, it immediately then distracts the child from looking at the real world to exploring the color itself. So the crayon will be used, just exploring the materiality of that particular object. So they will forget that, of course, that can be looked at as an exploration in material. But the moment we compare drawing with coloring, then we are missing something, in that actually. It's like giving eraser to a child. When eraser comes to a child, for an adult, it is for erasing. For a child, it's a material by itself, which will keep reducing its size as you rub. So the child approaches eraser from a completely different point of view, but the adult doesn't seem to understand this paradigm shift. This is very crucial to understand. So the question that we need to ask is that whether children should learn to write or learn to draw. Should they learn the word or should they learn the world? So the redefinition of drawing is that drawing is the playing that children do on two-dimensional surface. Or drawing is the process by which children make sense of the three-dimensional world in terms of two-dimensional space. So this is an act of abstraction in one way. Of course, it's also a reduction in one way, because what can be experienced and what can be replayed can never be drawn. So naturally, you can also understand what really happens when we shift from real world understanding into understanding within the realm of books. What is the reduction that happens? So given a environment, drawing comes naturally to children than writing. Of course, when you give a particular kind of environment, and they would write on wall, floor, everywhere. And the reason why they draw and what they draw are dictated biology, and which is exactly like what they do with materials, like sitting on a sofa and bouncing. I'm sure adults won't approve that, but children are doing it. It's natural to them. So there are many, many such natural tendencies that we need to understand. So just making the statement that drawing as a cognitive process, and this observation of form, shape, color, detail, function. This is what happens in observation. And comprehension also, this is a part and parcel of our inherent ability. This is not something that we have to do purposely. This is like how we learned our mother tongue. With no effort, we learned it, however complex that is, So there is something that is happening within us, which we have not paid attention at all. And the qualities of attention, interest, patience, this is also part of this. Of course, this also part of the autonomy that is provided to the child. Otherwise, this won't happen actually. So, and communication and aesthetic awareness. So I'll just share with you one video that so this video actually challenged our conception of what is drawing. You can see that this child here, she started drawing first, and then another child joined, another child, and so four of them joined one by one. Nobody was asking permission, nobody was giving permission, nothing like that. They started drawing on one page, and after some time, the first one left, others took over the drawing and completed it. So this is a very, very interesting challenge for a modern people like us and educated people like us to see it. And immediately because we were so open and we were seeking guidance from children, we reorganized our space. There was another very interesting interesting event. See what these children are doing. They are combining drawing with playing. So it's an activity that combined these two. And as we listen to the children, we realize that what they were telling was that this is water flowing, and they were doing that all around the whole building, the whole hall. So this is another challenge that that the children posed us. That so naturally we reorganized our situations. Anywhere, everywhere they could draw, and they were near we were surrounded by hills and river and all that. Naturally, their drawing was that. In fact, one day a child also remarked that she would need a huge paper to draw that huge mountain that she's seeing, So somewhere they are seeing the limitation of drawing in an A4 size paper, which is what we normally give to children, So that is why we allow, we created an environment where children can draw anywhere. That was a, important thing. Now, I would just give you some glimpse of what I mean by the stages, like the crawling stage of drawing. Scribbling, blabbering. So this is a stage that would, kind of go on probably till 13, 14 years. Now this is another interesting thing. This is actually a child writing actually. She had been seeing someone writing, so she began to imitate writing. And I have also known people who have, children who have learned to write also on their own with no adult support at all. It's just that somehow we have just not been open to the idea that children can learn on their own. So, other thing that I just would like to show you is that what children actually recreate is the various aspects of the world, which is form, function, process, structure, relationship, and context. This is what the world is all about. And this is the basic building blocks to understand the world. So children experience the whole, but decode the parts and then explore it. This is how children do. Through recreation, which is play, abstraction, which is drawing, articulation, which is language. So all these three things come as one subset of, this whole thing. So this is what we meant by form, how things look. This is the function, that they imagine something to be their house and they were using it as a house, And the process is how do they make something. So process is how do they make a house. Function is how do they use a house. Form is how a house looks like. These three things are explored. Same thing happens in language learning, because the child had seen this bird flying. So the child called this kaka. A peacock is called as kaka because kaka became the first name to categorize everything that flies. And the peacock started walking, and it was named kutta. So everything that walks is kutta, everything that flies is crow. And it is the functional thing that they looked at in this case, Whereas in this case, the child used to call Billy the cat, and when she saw the lion and tiger, the child started calling it Bada Mimi, big cat. So obviously it is the what children see is what gets translated into the making of language. So it's interesting that the lion had two ways. Children was looking at lion in two ways, because from the front it was like a cat, from the body it was like a dog. So the child would keep changing between these two. And the same thing you can see in drawing also. In the form, how things look like, with simple abstraction, the child captures the essence of things actually. And here the child is trying to draw the viper, and there are many hundreds of drawings of viper, and naturally the child is also trying to understand how that works, and how things work, how and even vehicle movement is something that is of interest to a child. So this very clearly shows that there is a reduction happening from experiencing the real world to recreation of play. From that to articulation in language, when you write and talk, it's only a very fraction of your experience that you're able to convey through language. And even in drawing, that what happens. So imagine what happens to a modern paradigm which uses only text, only language, only the two-dimensional frame to understand the world. So this reductionism basically is not because of Descartes. It's because we are using two-dimensional space to, and not even to understand the real world. We are only trying to understand what is written down, because since we don't use our senses, there is no access to the real world at all actually. And of course, in that process, categories gets created, and these categories are created due to the sensory input, not from language. Because you can call mango amchi, manga, tanga, tonga, tinga, you give any name, but the taste of mango doesn't change. So it's actually at an experiential level, you're able to understand, this is not bitter, this is sweet. This is not Karela, this is not bitter gourd, this is mango. Or this is not apple, not by the name, but by experience. So there is a very clear evidence of category cognitive process in this in drawing. So that is what we would like to explore in the course that we are proposing, where each of these activities would be looked at and revisited, maybe observe what children are doing, and then the whole format will be that two kinds of things. One, if you don't have access to children, then you actually relive the way children have been exploring the world. For people who have children, they can naturally observe what children are doing, document them, and share it with the group that is involved in learning. So that's the whole idea. So each of these categories will be looked at. Stages, similarity in play, toy, that one. Then observation and repetition, abstraction, imagination, story creation, details, then exploring complexity, creation of categories, organization of space, development of aesthetic sense. And then just one more thing, what really happens when we engage with writing and what happens with drawing. What happens to the eye? There is a physical change in the way the eyes function and how the brain functions, because the writing demands your eye to function in a linear and a sequential manner, whereas drawing demands you to be holistic and simultaneous. When you look at something, there's a simultaneity in that looking, but that is not the way when we begin to read. So there is a rewiring of the brain because of this, because you begin to, reading will make you, memorize, reason, read, think. It becomes a mental process, whereas drawing would make you observant and present. So drawing retains the presence of the child, because the child is naturally present to the world. And this absence is created because we take children out of the world and put them into the realm of language and words and mind. So naturally we become daydreamers and we become absent to the real world. So, of course, there is also another area that can be explored if the participants are also interested, to look at drawing in history, and also to look at the importance of drawing within the modern space also, because there are many professions like design, architecture, and even I know of a surgeon who uses drawing as a tool. So these kind of tools are not only important for every profession. This has a very important role actually. So we would also like to look at people like Leonardo and few people like that who have used drawing, because he's both a scientist and an artist. They have not been fragmented by that. uh, so how he used it for observation, imagination, and things like that. So, and historically, drawing and science have worked hand in hand. So this is one thing that we can revisit. And now regarding the program that we are proposing, the 3-day program is really about trying to shift from the mind-based knowing, word-based knowing, into an experiential-based knowing. So naturally, there will be an unlearning session. How do we move from two-dimensional thinking into three-dimensional perception? How do we shift that? So there will be certain exercises that would probably allow the participant to kind of understand this shift, that what does actually 3-dimension do to you and 2-dimension to you. Just one simple example that I would like to ask is that for most people who are present here, I'll take an example of India only. So people who have lived in Delhi, when they travel to Kanyakumari, or people who travel, or for example, somebody is in Bombay, he's going to Delhi, or they are traveling to Kanyakumari or Kerala. So what is happening for an educated in the mind? When you're traveling to Delhi, you feel you're going up. When you're traveling to Kerala, you feel you're going down. So how is this constructed within the mind? Is that true at all? Is there anything called down, going up and coming down? So this is what happens when we engage with the two-dimensional world, and the mind rewires your total understanding and process. So this is just to give you an example. There are such examples with which experientially one can begin to understand the cognitive habits that has been formed, and how do we, so this will also make us understand children better. That is one very important thing, because they don't belong to our two-dimensional space in which we imagine many things, so this would be the first day's activity, and the second day would be spent more on presentation of all the things that we spoke about. And on the third day, what we are proposing is that we have been having 3-4 groups, WhatsApp groups, first 5 years, then reimagining, initiating learning and all that kind of groups. And what we have been observing is that most of the documentation that are being conducted are not done properly. In the sense, the shooting is not done properly, which also means that the observation is not proper. So we were wondering whether, there would be a practical session on how to shoot without disturbing children, and how to observe, and also just by using simple mobile phone and a little bit of editing if necessary, and then creating a small document, so that by the time we finish this the course, we will have a fantastic document of what we have been this course. So that's the whole idea. On the third day, that is what we are proposing to do, and the whole course is for 3 months, and every second Saturday and fourth Saturday would be the time for meeting, where the 2 weeks would be used for observation and documentation. And of course, we would also create a WhatsApp group in which we can also, if necessary, meet, or if necessary, exchange, converse. So that is how this whole thing is organized actually. And the just the summary again, how drawing is seen. So the whole summary is this, that how drawing is seen now. How do we look at drawing right now from a modernistic paradigm? What is its real potential, and how do we reimagine drawing? So this is what going to be the the summary of the whole program actually.